As a death doula, you've seen firsthand the regrets women have faced when on their deathbed. Not living for ourselves is a huge one. So we don't make the same mistakes, if we were given only 30 days to live, what would we do before it was too late?
I suggest that every decision that you make, you filter through the lens of your death, which is, if I were to die tonight, would I be glad I did this thing? Will I be mad I didn't? Or will it matter at all? And use that as a barometer to figure out what decisions you want to make and where and why.
So how did you come up with the conclusion of those three things? And explain what a death doula is. Let's actually start there.
A death doula is somebody who does all of the non-medical and holistic care and support for the dying person and the circle of support through the process. However, the dying person is defined pretty loosely. It means anybody who has come into some awareness that one day they'll die. So much of the work that I do is focused on supporting people to prepare for death. And that means a myriad of things, either the practical things, like getting all your affairs in order, the emotional things, making sure that your relationships are in a good space, saying your thank yous and I love yous and I'm sorries, the spiritual, getting clear on what, if anything, happens after death. I'm privy to the places where there is some stickiness, some rub in how people are living and what they don't want still in place when they die. So those regrets are mostly around how they spent their time, what they did while they were here. We think of time as this infinite resource that we're just going to do it tomorrow or in 10 years, or what am I going to do in 20 years? Yet somebody who has some awareness that death is around the corner is pretty clear that time is very, very finite. And so they're very intentional about how they use that time. And so many of us can take the invitation now to start living like we don't have all of forever to do the things that we want to do, so we can focus our attention on the things that we want to do. For most of us, we know what it is that tickles us, the things that make us feel really alive, the things that make us lose sense of time or feel like our best, most authentic, fullest selves. So take a good catalog of those things in your life that make you feel that way and spend your next 30 days doing that. Where are the places that you find yourself losing time, where you find yourself enraptured by beauty or feeling very curious about something, leaning into those places that make us feel really, really alive.
Now, what people may not know about you, though, is you actually were an attorney. You were a lawyer. And so if you don't mind explaining, A, how you got into that, why you left, and then if you could go back to that old you, what would you say to them about time isn't infinite, live into the now?
So after I graduated college, I didn't know what else to do with myself. My dad said, well, if you want to find a way to make a change in the world, go to law school. And so I did. It made a lot of sense. I also knew that I would really make him proud. I would make my community proud. I'd make my family proud. And it seemed to be an important thing to do, or a thing that other people would think was a good thing that I was doing with my life. After graduation, I took a job at the Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles, supporting low-income people in their housing matters and their domestic violence cases and a variety of cases. And I grew really, really, really depressed. I grew a very, very, I want to say fat depression, but in fact, I was really, really thin. I was so sick. I generally afford myself a lot of space in this world, a lot of space with my body, and being really, really thin was an indication for me that I wasn't well. And during that time, I took a medical leave of absence from work. I wasn't capable of working anymore. I went to Cuba and I met a fellow traveler on the bus who also had cancer. She had uterine cancer. We spent a lot of time talking about her life, and then we started talking about her death, and I started saying, wow. This human who's just about the same age as I am, otherwise similarly situated, could die in the next few years from her disease. It was a massive wake-up call to me. It was one of the first times that I'd ever sat with my mortality in any real way. And I realized that if I were to die from the disease of depression that I had, I would not be pleased with the life that I'd led. I hadn't done the things that I really wanted to do. I had been living mostly for my community members, for my family, for my dad. All I knew was doing things the way that I was taught to do them. I'd been married before and it wasn't working, and so I had to get my way out of that, but getting my way out of that was a mountain to climb. And I got a lot of feedback about the choice that I was making. And everybody thought, well, he seems great and you seem great and you guys are great. So you get married, you have kids, that's what you do. And I thought, that can't be what I do. It can't be. This life that I was living wasn't mine. I was living for everybody else. But mine is mine and only mine when I'm dying, reckoning with every single choice. I wonder sometimes. I was so sick that the idea of not living anymore had certainly crossed my mind as a way of getting out of this painful life. Not necessarily because I wanted to die, but because I couldn't consider continuing to live the way that I was living. Depression is like a wet, heavy cloak that lies and tells you all types of stories that aren't true. What I learned from death is that my time is very, very limited. And I am the only one who's going to have to reckon with all the choices I've made on my deathbed. Not my dad, not my parents, not my family, not my community, not my partner, not my children if I had them, nobody but me. And so I may as well live the life that I want to live, the life that is authentic to me, because that's the life that I know I can die from and be comfortable dying from.
I've got a quote of yours that really hammers home what you're talking about, and it's from your book. You are the only one that has to contend with all of the choices you have made at your death. And so I actually read an article, it's from Psychology Today, and it talks about the regrets most people have in order. And so I'd love to run through them with you and to get your thoughts of what types of regrets live in these buckets. So the first one is romance. 19% of people have regrets around romance on the deathbed. What are those regrets, do you think they are? And then what can we do in order to not get to the regrets?
What I've seen in my practice is often around not saying the hard things, not having the real conversations with folks. I got a piece of advice from a client one time because I'd come and sit with her and we'd talk about her life, and she had been confined to a bed for years. And she would tell me, just tell him how you feel. Just tell him how you feel. And I thought, God, I can't do that. What do you mean? Open up my mouth and say, I like you? God, I'd rather die. No. I mean, casually, I'd rather die.
Right,
not actually.
but that's important, right? To be like, oh, actually, would I rather die?
Would I rather die? No, I could just open up my mouth and tell that I like him. And I did. I didn't die. He did not return my feelings. I thought I was going to die as a result. I did not. I'm still living.
Okay, so take me through that actually then,
Sure.
because that's, I think, the fear that everyone has, that if I open my mouth, then they're going to reject me. Oh my God, I'd rather die. But when you're on your deathbed, that shit is real.
Yeah.
So you open your mouth, you tell him you like him.
Yeah.
And?
He says, I think you're really sweet. And I'm so grateful I said something, because otherwise I would have wondered all this time. And so the regret, I think, is the folks who don't say the things that they need to say. They don't say their I love yous. They also don't apologize. They don't say I'm sorry when they are, or please forgive me when they've been wrong. Because things like that we don't say end up putting bricks between us and another human. And in romance, that's the death knell for the relationship. So it's often around not saying the things. I had a client once who missed the bus to go meet this love of his 50 years or so ago. And he still regretted it on his deathbed. Yeah.
50 years.
It had been so long at that point, and he still remembered it. He'd been married and had children since then, but that moment just really stuck with him.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's heartbreaking. Okay, the next one in order is 17% have regrets around family.
I think a mistake people often make is conflating biological family with actual family, where many of us choose our family. I am grateful to come from a family that has pretty close bonds, and yet even in a close family dynamic, there's always some challenges. But how do we show up for the challenges in a meaningful way to create repair, or rather to be okay with the choices that we've made and say goodbye? People, I think, often get confused and think that because somebody's dying, you have to make everything okay with them. But only if you want to make everything okay with them. If you are pleased with the choices that you've made, if you can make your peace with somebody dying without you ever saying, I'm sorry, or please forgive me, or here's how you hurt me, then that's your choice to have made, and that's okay as well.
God, and it's heartbreaking though that it would take a threat of a death to say the things that maybe you've always wanted to say,
Absolutely.
but don't.
Things become so simple and clear that either the opinions of others don't matter anymore, or in the grand scheme of things, it's not going to make a difference. You know, I think often about shame and feeling ashamed about some choices I've made or not made, or clients that I support often talk about their experience with shame. But at that point also, when we die, I will just be a memory for other people. There'll be tangible things of me, but there's not going to be any lived experience of me anymore. When I die, what I feel ashamed about is going to extinguish along with me. I'm probably not going to carry that through. And so whatever it is I may be feeling shame about right now is a very, very, very temporary. The people who I feel ashamed to have done so-and-so in front of, they will also die, which means they won't carry that with them forever either.
So why do we care?
Oh, because the ego. To be ashamed is to die a small death of the ego. There's grief involved in that as well. To be embarrassed is to die a small death of the ego. To be mortified, the root word is mort, which is to die. It's all about the deaths that we experience and feeling shame and feeling mortified and embarrassed.
Is shame a big thing that a lot of people have on their deathbed?
Absolutely.
Really?
I think it's a lot of things that we all carry that many people don't talk about until there's nothing left to hide for. The masks fall off a lot as people start to die. They start to get a lot more real. And one of those masks is the things that they keep close to the chest because they don't want to injure or they don't want to expose themselves, they don't want to be vulnerable. But once the mask falls, then here's all my shame, here's all my regret, here's all my sadness. I think it's important to whittle down to the thing it is that you're trying to protect, that shame is telling you needs to be protected. Because often that thing that we're trying to protect is the experience of ourselves in the eyes of another. You see what I mean? And so if I'm trying to protect that thing so much because I'm so concerned with what somebody thinks of me and I'm thus ashamed, if I can divorce myself from their experience of me, but rather be okay with my experience of me, then it's likely that it's maybe more possible for me to be with my shame. I think also voicing it is helpful. To say, I'm embarrassed, I feel ashamed that this thing occurred. I think when we can allow ourselves to be seen, we allow ourselves to be loved for exactly who we are. And I think love is a powerful antidote to shame. I find that people generally want to unburden themselves more as they get closer to the end of life. A lot more people are just a lot more real. There's very little talk about the weather.
So true.
Yeah.
And a lot more talk about the things that happened in their childhood and years ago. And wow, that's so true. Okay, so the next one under regrets is education at 14%. So what are the regrets do you think people have on education in their career?
I think people often feel like they should have done something other than what they did. Most of these regrets seem to fall in the buckets of how I showed up in life, like what I did with my time while I was here. And so many people, I learned, did not want to take the career path that they did and rather would have chosen another one that perhaps is based on their skills and talents and where they feel most alive, the things that make them feel champagne bubbles in their blood, as opposed to the things that give them money or external validation for being smart or have access or be good, according to some metrics.
So the education piece, as you were saying, like with regret and stuff, it really does feel like so many regrets are things that people didn't do versus the things that people did do.
So often I find that's what people regret, the things that they didn't do, the chances they didn't take, the words they didn't say, the opportunities they said no to. What would happen if we said yes? The worst that would happen is that it doesn't work out, then we're in the same position as we were before. Or we experience a little bit of shame, a little death of the ego, but recognize that it's just the death of the ego. And I'm actually physically still okay.
And the idea that it's something that we didn't do, is that because we project like the potential that could have led us to?
Yeah, I think humans are really, really good at filling the unknown with dread and fear and worry and, oh my God, all these things that could go wrong. And yet the flip side, all these things that could go right is still available. It's just a question of our perspective on it. Because if I take this job and something terrible happens, but if I take this job and something amazing happens, then may as well take the job.
So you also talk about like the importance of making meanings out of things. So talk to me about how we make meaning out of things and how we can use that as a strength instead of potentially as weakness, I guess.
We put so much value on things having meaning, our lives having this great meaning, like what is the meaning of my life? where in reality, I am but one of 110 billion that have come and gone. I can't even get my head around how many hundreds, how many zeros that is after that number. So I have a small part to play. I am but a fabric, a tiny, tiny piece of thread in a massive tapestry. My meaning could be to fulfill that little thread. That means that when I live my most authentic self, I'm fulfilling my role in that large tapestry. To fulfill that little thread, I just have to be me. I just have to do the things that make me feel good, the things that make me feel alive and feel present. That's where I place my meaning on my life. Many people place it in a lot of other things, and none are better than others. Some folks place a lot of meaning in their children or in their work or in their money, their success, external markers of validation, and that's all on them. That's a choice that they make. And yet, when we look at the choices that they've made and how they align with their own personal fulfillment, that's where it's ripe to create a lot of meaning. Is this chosen path bringing me fulfillment? If not, I need to reassess where I actually place my meaning. If it is, keep going. Keep going.
Where did you used to place your meaning, and where do you place it now?
I used to place it in the expectations of others. I used to really pride myself on being in service and of giving and giving and giving. I'm a really empathic person, you know, just so porous. Like I could feel anything happening 10 miles away in a way that was really difficult to exist in the world. And that meant that I would often give in places where I felt people needed some support. Now I see that doing that means that I had a hard time separating myself, my experience from that of another's experience, which is not really the most useful thing. It certainly isn't working for me. It isn't working for me at all. And so daily now, being in the practice of shoring up my own boundaries so that I'm not giving and giving and giving is helpful.
How do you stay positive? How do you stay with such high energy and think the positive in things when you've seen so much hardship?
I will say that being around people that are dying, it can be sad, but it's not necessarily heavy. It's not. In fact, it's very life-affirming. There is so much life happening when death is occurring. It's such a human thing to do. I experience a lot of comfort in emotional depth. I can be with like difficult emotions, big emotions, people's experience of their emotional body. For one, I think it's such an amazing thing to be able to feel, because as a result of depression for years, I didn't feel anything. And so to feel rage or sadness or grief or awe or joy or cold, anything is an utter gift to be able to feel something. So I take that, it's a gift to me. It's a gift unto my life to be able to support other people through that. It doesn't feel hard to me. In fact, I have a much harder time running a business and doing taxes than I do showing up when somebody's dying.
Wow. That sense of purpose, I assume, is very powerful for you, especially because you didn't live in your own purpose when you were studying and going to law school. How important is a sense of purpose, do you think, to somebody's life?
I think a sense of clarity of being is really important to somebody's life. I think we often get wrapped up in the idea of making big purpose, kind of like we get wrapped up in making a big meaning, where the purpose could be the little things that you enjoy in your life, the little things that bring you some joy. I had a client that I wrote about that had spent most of her life working. She had had children, but she spent most of it working. And for some folks, it would have been such a marvel that she had young children at a time when women were relegated to the kitchen, that she also had this career. You know, I think she was the early model for many working mothers. And yet she felt so much guilt over the choice that she'd made because the choice that she made brought her joy. She thought that she should have been at home with her children. She didn't want to be. She wanted to be out working. She enjoyed working. So her purpose then turned out not to be her children like she thought that it should have been, that she was experiencing a lot of shame about, but rather for being this beautiful model for working moms, for enjoying her life, for giving her kids an example of a woman whose life isn't all about them. That to her, that was the greatest gift I think she could have given and come to at some point.
Well, going back to then the meaning that you give things, it's us giving the meaning of, if I work and have children, then it means I may not be a good mom or I may not be able to serve my kids. That's the meaning that you're making. So how actually do you think about things like that? And Are you able to change the meaning of something so that it can serve what you're looking for, your goals and your dreams?
I hope we do all the time. The meaning is merely the story that we're telling about the thing. I make my own meaning, you make yours, they're not the same. And so the value that I'm placing on something is the meaning that I give it. I can change my mind at any moment. I can change my mind. For a long time, I was very interested in my career. I was very interested in how many women that I could support through their domestic violence cases. That number was a marker of my success. Now, how many minutes I can spend in awe of my miraculous existence is a marker of my success.
Do you think that you would have had that if you hadn't experienced the depth of your depression?
No, there's no way. Getting that close to despair, sitting like in the pit of apathy, was the thing that allowed me to open up. Thinking about my mortality was the thing that allowed me to open up to what a gift being alive is, which is the thing that invites a lot of joy and presence into my life.
Do you also think about like waiting in a different way now?
No, I'm still impatient.
I wasn't sure which way you were going to go. It's like either you're like, no, I'm not patient at all, or yes, I'm extremely patient. Because I think about the thing for myself. I was a stay-at-home wife for 8 years. There's nothing wrong with being a stay-at-home wife at all. I always say it was like one of the hardest jobs I ever had.
Yeah.
I just didn't want it. So I wasn't living the thing that really made me tick, that like helped me feel alive. And what I used to say to myself is, I'll do it when. I do it when my husband's happy. I'll do it when I have the confidence. I'll do it when I have the money. And so that waiting of pushing it later. Now I'm 44, I'm very much, Lisa, like, yes, you want to live till you're 100, but now you can't push it too much later. So thinking about how many people use that when as that pause button on their lives.
Procrastination, to me, is a form of death denial at its core. Because it says, I'll do it tomorrow. But you are not guaranteed tomorrow. None of us are guaranteed tomorrow. And so saying, I'll just push it off is banking on a future that's unknown, whether or not you'll have access to it. And so we may as well start right now, because what are you waiting for anyway? Like, what is it that we're waiting for, you know? And life doesn't begin when you lose 20 pounds or when your husband's happy or when your kids are grown or Friday or the next vacation. Your life is happening at this moment. My life is happening at this moment. This is it. And we may as well begin living like this is it. If it's something that matters enough for us to care about, thinking about doing it tomorrow, let's switch to thinking about it, reframe it, and see what's stopping us from doing it right now.
What do you think is usually stopping us from doing it right now? If you wake up every morning craving that first cup of coffee, but also actually dreading the bloating, the jitters, and the crashes that come with it, you're so not alone, especially for us women. But let's face it, what's the alternative? Zombieing through our morning half awake? Now, there's finally a coffee replacement actually designed for women from Peak called Nandaka. Every cup of Nandaka nourishes you and uplifts your energy instead of making you feel anxious and jittery. Nandaka is expertly formulated with the highest quality and purest ingredients to activate your metabolism, provide sustained energy, and balance your hormones. Kick your coffee habit and enjoy the endless wellness benefits from Nandaka from Peak. Now, for a limited time, you get 15% off, plus a free starter kit and a bottle of Propolis throat spray when you shop the link you see on the screen, or you can find it in the show notes. That's 15% off plus a free starter kit. Transform your mornings with Peak.
Death denial, fear of inadequacy, fear of failure, and fear of success, self-worth. Yeah. But the reality is that by virtue of being born, I am worthy. You know, I'm worthy of success. I'm worthy of a nap. I'm worthy of getting help. I'm worthy. Now, if only I can behave like it all the time and not put off till some time when I'm 20 pounds lighter and then maybe I'll be worthy. No. You're worthy right now. You're worthy right now.
And that's it, that we don't believe we're worthy. So we think that if we push it forward, then maybe I'll get worthy on the path and then I'll get to it.
Yeah, but the life is not happening there.
Yeah. And the worthiness won't come unless you actually take action.
Right now.
Yeah. So in that idea then, help me understand why it's hard for women to get older, why a lot of women I know still, and I encourage them not to, but they lie about their age, or they're embarrassed about their age, or they're crying on their 40th birthday. For someone as yourself who's a death doula, having a birthday must be the biggest freaking blessing. So what is it that's happening to people where we're just fearful getting older, and that birthday that used to be a celebration when we were 21 is now like some people see it as a detriment to them? And then why we will lie or hide from it, and how do we start to embrace aging instead of running from it?
It's all fear of death, but I'm also really biased. But thinking about myself getting older necessarily means that I think I'm older to the time when my life will end. I'm getting closer to the time my life will end. So 45 makes me closer to 90 than it did when I was 21, and 90, how many people are still alive at 90? You know, that's a very basic thinking around it. However, getting older is a gift. It's a gift. The only reason I'm aging is because I'm still alive. And so when I stop aging, it's because I died, not because some miracle came about. I don't know that I would go back to 21 for anything.
I definitely wouldn't.
Right? Okay, so I had like amazing kneecaps and my boobs sat up here, but so what? I am so much happier now. I'm so much more embodied now. I have so much more life experience now. I have so much more awareness of who I am and also who I'm not, I'll say. And I think a lot of that comes with aging. There's just time. There's more experience to draw from. And that ultimately gets me that much closer to living a life that feels authentic to me, because I have time. I think it's a great thing. I'm not trying to hide all these wrinkles. You know, so often, you probably hear this a lot too, but that thing of, you don't look that old, or I can't believe you're that old. Yeah. It's like, okay, I think it's a compliment. But I think that compliment also is wrapped up in our death denial and our fear and avoidance of death, because it says you don't look as decrepit as you should based on your age.
Here's the thing that I really battle with, right? Because I think the society judges us women as getting older. I can't change society as a whole, but I can change how I think about it. And so when I think about aging, I lean into it. To your point, I had a guest on, this was made years ago, and she just said out of the blue, she was an announcer on television. And so it was her birthday, and so she announces, but she lies about her age. And someone pulls her aside after and was like, why did you lie about your age? And she's like, well, in my career, I will never get another job again if I say how old I really am as a female on television. And the guy just turned around and he's like, look, you've got two choices. You can get older, you can die. And I remember that this was like 4 or 5 years ago, and it stuck with me. And because of that, I started to look at how I'm aging and then how I actually see it as a beautiful thing and not as a negative thing. Because I don't think it serves us beating ourselves up over the fact that we're living longer. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. So as I look at wrinkles, right, I'm like, oh, that proves that you laughed.
A lot.
And just try, but it doesn't come naturally to me though.
Right.
And so I'm trying to think of the tips and the tactics that I can use that allow me to feel proud of me growing older. And so how do you think about aging? How do you think about making sure that you live the life that you really want and you never get trapped, back into where you were as a lawyer and the expectations? But then how do you do that with being happy and prideful of it?
It's tricky. You know, a lot of aging, I think, is also unlearning a lot of the societal expectations, particularly around youth and beauty and value and worth. My clients' bodies tell the story of their lives. You know, I can kind of tell how they lived based on what their bodies say when they're getting close to the end. When I see the gray hairs that are starting to sprout right here, I mean, I think they're through there too, but you can't see them because of my locks, but I see a lot of them right here. And I think about the experiences that I've had in my life thus far, and they're marks of pride at this point. I toiled. I made it through some things. The pigment is starting to fade. It's been working hard for a long time, and it is tired. They're marks of pride. My scars, same way. I lived. It's showing on my body at this point, and I feel grateful to still be here, to be able to tell that story with my body.
I love the idea of that it's a story, that it's telling you that you've been here. Again, we go into ourselves, and I think we can build shame around certain things or try to hide things. And I think that does such a detriment to our mindset. And so that's why I'm really fascinated. I'm fascinated by your career. I'm fascinated by what you do. Apart from the fact that, again, I think that it could be very difficult. I know that you said that it can be beautiful, but you being there for somebody in those moments, just the peace they must have where they're no longer scared, But the fact that you've seen how this kind of turns out in essence, and being able to use that as a tool to empower the living is so freaking profound. Do you feel that as well? Do you feel that you're able to be that voice of people who are, don't have the opportunity to take another day's breath?
I think that I'm really honored to be in this position. I feel a lot of honor to be able to share this with people. And I think that this is the most basic thing. So I don't find that I'm coming in with some like knowledge and wisdom to drop on anybody. So I said, listen, your death is written into your birth for every last one of us. It's not a secret. It's not a secret at all. I feel grateful that I'm either blessed with a decent amount of hubris, or I lack tact, or I'm super sensitive, that I can just say the thing that is most pressing on my heart at the time. And sometimes that is, we are wasting time. We're spending time in ways that don't feel like us. You are going to die. Now, what are you doing about it today? It's a gift. It's an honor. I feel very, very, very honored to be able to carry this message in my body. That also feels like the very most basic thing.
How do you navigate in real time now, making sure that you say the things, but let's say you're healthy and you're alive and now okay, well, like, I'm not going to be around forever. So if this person really upset me, but I love them, I should just tell them that I love them, because you never know, I may not wake up tomorrow. I love that. But how do you make sure that you don't apologize for things that you don't actually mean, or you don't just like try to make peace amongst people when actually you have strong feelings? Because I think that's what a lot of people do. Is I don't want to rock the boat.
Rock it. This is your life. This is your only one that we know of. Rock it. Tell your truth. But that requires us being in touch with our truth, And if your truth is that you don't want to rock the boat, then what is underlying that truth? Do you not find enough value to have your needs be validated or paid attention to or rectified in some way, For the example that you gave, somebody who perhaps has some difficulty with somebody, but they love them, so they want to say they love them, I'd say also tell them how they've hurt you and the things that they've done that have been difficult for you. Ultimately, I think when we show people our wounds is the place that we're allowing light and love to pour into ourselves. Every time I don't speak my truth about how I'm feeling about something, how somebody has perhaps hurt me, I'm denying them an opportunity to love me in that way as well. I'm also denying myself the love. Now, I find that getting close to the end of life, when people are unburdening themselves and they're sharing of themselves, I cannot help but fall in love with them. They are vulnerable. The time is intimate. It's a ripe opportunity for humans to meet each other on a very, very real level. We can do that right now, but we have to be willing to open ourselves up in that way. Yeah, and be willing to be okay with the consequences of it.
How are you able to be okay with the consequences of it?
You may not be heard. If you say you hurt me and somebody's like, well, that's your own damn fault, then what do you do with it? Is your hurt any less valid because that person responded in that way, or do you have it on your own? And constantly, always running it through the perspective of your death. If I were to die tomorrow, is it important that I told so-and-so that they hurt me? If not, let it go. And if it is, by all means, say it.
How often do you ask yourself that question?
If I'm gonna die tomorrow?
Yeah.
Every day.
Do you?
Multiple times a day. Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's because I'm doing something utterly ridiculous, like the tub is slick and I'm reaching for the towel a little too far. And I'm like, ooh, this could be it.
Do you actually process risk differently now then?
Yeah, I think so. But I find that they're always worth taking. I have to trust the timing of my death. I'm going to trust the timing of my death. I also trust the timing of my life. Everything has happened the way that it should. My death will too. It's a difficult pill to swallow, but it's true.
One of my favorite lines of a movie, I think it was Shawshank Redemption, and it says, get busy living or get busy dying.
Great. Yes, get busy living. My brother-in-law, Peter St. John, was sick right after I came back from Cuba. And he died about 6 months after his Burkitt's lymphoma diagnosis. And he had this shirt that he wore that said, fuck cancer, get busy living. I mean, that shirt is just threads at this point, but whenever I just need to, A, feel a little bit closer to him, or B, feel a little bit closer to my life, I put the shirt on. Get busy living.
What does that look like to you?
That looks to me like sometimes taking a nap. It's the opposite. I think people often assume that being with our dying means that we are hustling and we're going and we're doing more and we're experiencing more. I think on the contrary, it means just being very, very honest with where I am right now and honoring my needs in this moment. To me, getting busy living means taking a while to look at that little bug. Yeah, feeling the sun on my skin, looking at my boo in his eyes a little bit longer than I would have, eating foods that I think are delicious, even if I don't need a second piece of cake, you know? Just being with my authentic, true desires, wants, needs, etc.
Oh my God, I love that. And I can't remember her name, but the woman who spent like 60 years of her life like dieting and never eating the cake, and then she finds out that she's sick and she's like, I wish I'd just eaten the cake.
Yeah.
And up until like the day of her death, you're like putting like food on her lips so that she can lick.
Yeah, or smell at some point because she couldn't taste anymore. We deny ourselves so much while we're living. And I do understand why on some level, because of societal expectations about who we should be. But who I should be is no less valuable if I'm carrying 30 extra pounds, you know? Obviously, eat some kale too. You know what I mean? Like, eat the things that your body needs. I don't always only want cake.
Right.
I also crave a salad sometimes. Just have to also mean I eat that.
Yeah. But those are the things, like when I heard you say that, I was like, yes, eat the cake. And again, I'm with you though, because there's the health thing. I want to live till I'm 100. If I eat cake every single day for lunch, breakfast, and dinner, I probably won't live till I'm 100. So there's that goal part of it. So I have my big reason why. But the idea that we say no or we sacrifice because of the external reasons, and actually we've been dying to have the cake for the past 60 years and the poor woman never does, it's sad to me that we have to have news that you're dying for us to then think about what do we actually enjoy in life.
Absolutely. And here's the reality, is you're dying right now. We're all in process right now. And so start living like it in some capacity, which means if you want the cake, have the cake. Granted, you could eat the cake every single day and still live to 100. You could
Can you, Alua?
You could eat kale every single day and die tomorrow. You know? We don't know.
How much of the people finding out that they're dying, no matter what age, the feeling of being out of control, how much of that plays on people's minds and the idea of being powerless? Because I really do think as women, what are things that we struggle with in our lives, and then how do we combat that? And the powerless thing as a woman in general, you feel like you're living the life for somebody else, you keep showing up for other people. And then the idea of meeting your death, or realizing that you're, mortal, and that there will be, you even said you slowly die. How much of the unable to control it is hard for people, and the powerlessness behind the fact that your life is being taken from you?
So much of the fear of dying is a question of control. Many of us live with this idea that we are in control somehow. And yet, living in Los Angeles as we do, I can't control whether or not the earth below me will shake when I put my foot on it. Every time there's an earthquake, I snap back into a reminder that I'm not in control of most of this. Also, the circumstances under which I die, the when, where, the how, those are not in my control unless I choose. The things that I can control are how I present my body, what I choose to eat and drink, how I choose to speak, how I choose to make meaning out of things or not. But the rest of it is utterly outside of my control. When getting close to the end of life, people often want to control. They want to hold on to something. Yet I have yet to meet anybody who was able to control their life such that they didn't die. Every day we have an opportunity to practice releasing control in some capacity. It will all still work out the way that it's going to, regardless of my desire to push it one way or another. I'm sure you experienced this when you were sick. I want to control my experience of being sick. I don't want to be sick. I want to get better immediately. I want to do all the things so I can just get better. Yet that's not within my control. And so practicing surrendering into what the body will do, what the ground will do, what the earth will do, what life will do. All I can do is control how I show up for it.
Yeah, because I love the idea of surrendering. I'm a control freak, and I've realized it. And it's something that I'm trying to surrender more to the situation. And, and when I think about the death thing and how I will process it, I will try and control it. And your TED talk was fantastic, especially because you open up with how you want to die. And I think it catches people off guard. that sort of thing, I think, becomes a way of thinking, not just on your deathbed, but in life itself.
Yeah, we can imagine things going pretty well and then surrendering to whatever the outcome is and then controlling my response to it. And I think that same thing comes up when we're thinking about our death, is that I am not going to be in control at all of what happens then unless I choose. So wanting to watch the sunset as I die, it's a really lovely idea, but it's one that I've cultivated because it gives me some peace about my death. I could feel it. I could imagine being in a car accident or swords raining from the skies down upon all of us or the bubonic plague. But that doesn't serve me. It doesn't bring me any peace. So why not rewrite the story to create some peace? And that's what I'm trying to do by thinking of my death in a way that feels peaceful and accessible. None of us know what the next minute is going to bring. We fear the unknown so much, which is one of the other major fears of death, is the unknown. What if anything happens after I die? Fill it with joy, fill it with beauty, fill it with glitter, fill it with unicorns, fill it with Swarovski crystals, whatever that brings you some peace, fill it with that.
Wow. What are the most powerful lessons you learned from the lady, the very first person that you met on the bus? If you don't mind, actually, you shared a little bit of her story, but if you don't mind sharing that and the connection that you guys had and then the lessons that she just taught you.
Jessica is her name, and she's still alive. Something powerful happened on that bus. It is that during our bus ride, well, prior to the bus ride, I'd met her, and she had a tattoo of a pen, a quill pen on her arm. And it was beautiful, but she just told me that she liked to write, and it didn't make any sense to me. I understand that people get tattoos with no meaning nowadays, I guess. But at the time, I was like, well, why would you get a tattoo of something that you just merely like? It didn't seem to track. And so on that bus ride, as we were talking about her disease and her fears around death, one of them was that she hadn't done the thing that she wanted to do, which was to write a book. Hence the tattoo. It made a lot more sense at that point. So we started talking about that and what she could do and how she would be able to make something, this thing that she was still holding on to. And she decided to write a book about her travels. Well, she was going to write a column about her travels. And those eventually became a book. And I think the rights were optioned for a movie. She's gone on to write 3 or 4 books since then. She's a full novelist. She's currently writing romance under a pseudonym. And the book is so juicy. And she's doing it. She's living the life that she envisioned by virtue of her sitting with her uterine cancer diagnosis, by digging through what that fear was. That was one of the major lessons, is what is undone in my life? What's undone? What do I still need to do? And what I still need to do was to live a life that felt authentic to me. No big deal. It's a very small thing. But that was what was still undone in my life, living the way that felt right and authentic to my being. So Jessica has been doing it incredibly. She's still doing it.
And so how did you then take those steps from hearing that story, being with her, being really moved and shifted to then changing your life? Because I want people to, I'm so actionable. So people here that have listened to this interview that feel really freaking inspired. I don't care if you're 20 years. I hope we reach the 20-year-olds. Like I really do. But no matter what age you are, how did you start to make that change?
It takes a lot of courage, but that courage is minuscule compared to the regret that you might feel at the end of your life. And so being with the present moment and the tiny steps that you need to take in order to get closer to the life that you want to lead. For me, thinking about my mortality was the thing that caused me to go full on out toward the thing that I wanted. And I didn't know what it was that I wanted yet. So I had to start envisioning the type of life that I wanted for myself. What were the things that I really valued and how could I continue doing more of that? One of the things that I really valued is being in these dense emotional conversations with people. That 14 hours on the bus with Jessica was some of the most magical of my life because we just got to go in for that entire ride. I love that. I love that. And gratefully now I've built a career that's what I get to do. I'm really, really nosy. And I just couch it in helping people prepare for the end of life. But tell me all your secrets.
Yeah.
Super nosy. As I mentioned, after I came back from Cuba, my brother-in-law got sick and he died. And I got to be present with him and for that moment, and also for all the difficulty, for all the grief and the sadness afterward, and also the bureaucratic nightmare. And I remember leaving where my sister was at the time, knowing that she had a mountain to climb ahead of her in terms of bureaucracy, and there was no support that we could offer her. I was looking for somebody to pay who could be with her through the entire process, and I couldn't find anybody. So I thought very clearly about the skills that I had, the gifts that I had, the things that made me feel really good inside, and a place where it was really needed. And so created a role that could support people in doing the thing that I needed the most. Essentially, I wanted to become who I didn't have when I needed it. And it seems to be a fit for my personality. And so now we have a career. But the hope that what folks take away is that it is a tiny, tiny step, leaning into the curiosity about who you are and what you enjoy and what your life has brought you thus far, what's still undone in it, and creating small actionable items to get you a little bit closer. But those may seem like a big burden right now, but they are very small in comparison to reaching the end of your life, not having lived the life that you want.
And how often do you then check in with yourself? Because I think that if someone's listened to this interview, right, in the moment, they're like, wow, okay, I hear you. But then life gets in the way. And a year down the line, people forget again that they're mortal and that they will end up dying. So how do you keep reminding yourself of that? Or is it because you're just in it enough that it's an automatic reminder?
I think I have to do it a little bit more consciously when things get really, really busy in my life. Right now, I'm talking about the book a lot, which means I'm going. And I have to pause to like step out and check to see if we're all still aligned. And we are. You know, all this work that I'm doing right now to talk about the book is in line with that greater message of supporting people as they answer their question for themselves. What must I do to be at peace with myself so that I may live presently and die gracefully? And this is it. This is a part of it for me. And so I'm still totally aligned. I'm still aligned.
God, that's such a powerful question. It is such a powerful question. I don't use those words, but like every probably quarter of the year, I ask myself, do you still love doing what you're doing? Like I just ask myself the questions. Are you happy owning a business? Do you still love doing the show? Are you happy in your marriage? Like I ask myself all the questions that people don't want to ask because I never want to be surprised. I never want to blink and 8 years ever go by again in my life and me not see whether I'm working towards a thing that actually fills me up or turning against the thing that fills me up. But asking that question, I think, is really beautiful. And it gives people a vocabulary now to be able to use. Because, yeah, I do live in the fear of we let life get away, the small little problems that we think are massive. And then how do we keep orienting back to, am I proud? If I died today, would I be happy? Would I be satisfied?
Absolutely. I think a practice of presence really helps also. Because when I'm here in this present moment, I can tell my joy, my rage, my grief, my sadness, etc. But when I'm worrying about something that is coming up soon or thinking so much about the things that I did or didn't do right, that doesn't allow me to have any bandwidth for what is right now. And when I'm with what is, I can tell very clearly if I'm enjoying the things that I'm doing. Or if that last meeting made me so frustrated and angry, well, what was the reason? Maybe do less of that. If I can delegate for somebody else to do that, great. If I can cut it out from the business plan, then great. Just find ways to still integrate the things that I still love with the things that still must get done that I don't want to do or don't bring me any joy in doing.
I've heard people talk about this a lot, and I was, in reading your book, I was like, I think I might do it. And I was actually planning to do it before this interview, and I was going to read it out, and I just didn't get time. But what do you think about people writing their own obituaries?
Love. I also think writing a eulogy is a little bit more appropriate.
What's the difference?
Okay, great. I'm glad you asked. An obituary is more born here, died here, survived by this person, did that. So obituary often talks about your accomplishments your accomplishments based on children or relationship or work.
Is that what, like they've got in the newspaper? Like,
yes.
Lisa
Exactly.
Got it.
A eulogy is the thing that somebody who cares about you a lot will read when you die, and that person is going to talk about who you were. Yeah, so write that.
So that's actually really interesting that we probably live all of our lives thinking about our obituary, but actually we should be thinking about our eulogy.
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, sometimes people conflate the two or talk a lot about accomplishments in a eulogy, but a eulogy is really an opportunity to talk about who the person was, what they valued, the little quirks, the things that made them a really rad or difficult human. Yeah, try it. You know, when I'm talking about how I want to die, my entire life is leading up to that point, which means then that how I'm living every day is going to get me a little closer or not. Am I somebody who pauses to take in the sunset now? If not, then why do I think I'm going to do that when I'm dying?
So what are your, now having done all the work and really kind of knowing this process, if you will, of going from living a full life to seeing someone take their last breath, what are your biggest fears now, having seen all of that, knowing, hearing other people's fears?
Yeah. A big fear of mine was that I wouldn't live long enough to see my book come out. And now we've got 3 weeks.
All right, we've got to keep you bubble wrapped.
Yes. Yeah, that was a fear. But I realized that that fear is based on how much it means to me and how important it is for me to get it out. Our fears of death can teach us a lot if only we're willing to pay attention to what the message is, and that's the message it was sending me. Another thing that still makes me a little uncomfortable is I grew up an evangelical Christian, yet I shunned religion very, very early on. And I'm always just that little seed of fear and doubt is still in me, if I'm going to be totally honest with you, about what happens after we die based on all the things I was taught very, very young and really just grew up with. Those are my major fears around death. My most fears of my death, though, aren't my death. They're of death generally, of my partner dying. Yeah, golly, falling in love, I think, is one that really brings all of our fears of death to the forefront, because all of a sudden this human walks into my life and now I don't want to imagine life without him, and yet one day I just might have to. And so that's a big fear of death that comes up. Thinking about my mom's death makes me really uncomfortable still. My dad, my sisters, my nephew, my niece, all those things still make me uncomfortable. It's a fear of pain, which is a very human thing, a fear of grief, a fear of loss. You know, I've crawled through that pit before, and it was a big one to walk out of. And yet, at the same time, I understand that grief can be a seed that is in our lives, and not to Pollyanna it at all, but when that seed cracks, beautiful things are able to spring from it if we're willing to see that possibility. Now, don't get me wrong, if my boo up and dies tomorrow, I'm just gonna forget it all. Just forget it. It's a wrap. It's a wrap. And eventually I'll probably still be okay.
I don't know if I will. I've been married now for 21 years, and I've said to my husband, I want to die before him.
Yeah.
I do not want to experience him not being here. And there was this meme that he sent me one day, and it was this image of an old man by his wife's grave. And he was placing flowers. It was like a little drawing. And there was a story that went along with it. And the story basically talks about this old man goes to visit his wife's grave. And on his way home, he's with his sons and he just starts laughing. And the sons are like, what's going on, Dad? Like, you've just been to Mum's grave. And he said, the thing that makes me so happy is that my wife will never have to know what it's like to live without me.
Yeah.
And I thought the same thing. And that idea, again, like I'm thinking from a positive, you talk about death positivity, right? It's like, I actually think about it from a positive standpoint, not like from a fearmonger, oh my God, he's gonna die tomorrow, but like, oh my God, I'm so blessed to have him in my life now. How do I make the most of it now so that I don't have those regrets 10 years down the line that I never said the thing I wanted to say or do the things with him that I wanted to do. And so yeah, that story really stayed with me.
It's a really good example of how we can use our fears around death to enrich our lives right now. Because you're seeing, God, that would be so awful to be here without him. Well, then how can I enjoy him as much as I can while we're both still here? That's the consistent invitation around our fears of death. Always, always. That fear can point to something that you value. So make more of it while you're here. And people often say, I love life so much, I don't want to die. Well, first of all, death is a part of life. And so you can't love just this part and not love that part. But next also, what is it that you love so much about your life? Be full of it so that by the time your death comes, you're like, I'm good, I did it. We can go.
And you talk about with every death, there can be an opportunity of a rebirth, obviously, if it's not specifically you dying. But I think you use the examples of, like if you end up divorcing or leaving that person, well, then now there's an opportunity for a better love, a new marriage, a new relationship. If you get unemployed and that fear of, oh my God, I've lost my job, well, now there's an opportunity to actually be an entrepreneur or have the career that you actually want, that you never took the chance in the first place. So how do you think about then life and death as that type of like balance? We grew up, but our cereal options didn't until now. Magic Spoon reinvented and upgraded cereal so it's got the same great taste that you remember, but with 0 grams of sugar, 13 to 14 grams of protein, and 4 to 5 grams of net carbs in each serving. All Magic Spoon cereal is also keto-friendly, gluten-free, grain-free, soy-free, wheat-free, and naturally flavored. Click the link below to grab a variety pack and try Magic Spoon today. Go to magicspoon.com/Lisa Bilyeu and use the promo code Lisa Bilyeu at checkout to get $5 off any order. And on top of that, Magic Spoon is so confident in their product, they have a 100% happiness guarantee. So guys, if you don't like it for any reason at all, they'll refund you your money, no questions asked. Click the link below or scan the QR code on the screen right there and use the code Lisa Bilyeu to save $5 today.
Well, in every ending is a beginning, and in every beginning is an ending as well. And so I think that if we can constantly see that the two are just playing with each other all the time, that life and death are so deeply commingled that I can't distinguish between the two when looking at my body on a cellular level, that it's all happening at the same time. There are a bunch of dead cells on me right now. And my understanding is that at the age of 25, the number of dead cells in the body outweigh the number of living cells in the body. Right. And so if that's the case, then am I more dying now or am I more living now? The two are constantly happening, constantly. And we can be with those, we can play with both those concepts at the same time. And I think when we do that, it allows us to see the beginnings and the constant endings, such that maybe when I'm getting a little closer to the end of my life, it could also be a new beginning.
And I find fascinating that because you were in a position where you felt so depressed, to think about how taking your life back then would have been potentially a relief of the agony, the emotional agony. Because I've heard that that's why people, they just can't take it anymore and they feel like that's the escape. But it's something like, they did a study where they did these interviews of the few people that actually ended up surviving jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge. And every single person that survived, I think it's only like 3 or something, but every single person that survived said, the second I let go, I wish I hadn't. And so when I think about how in that moment you feel like death is the escape, obviously that's the hardest escape possible, but then for that to realize actually you want life is very difficult to process, but also I think a way of showing how valuable and important life can be. But I really do struggle with the idea of death, that it can be for somebody a beautiful thing because they're just waiting to leave this world, and for somebody else a fearful thing because they don't want to lose someone in their life. How do you work through what death means to people and the positive and the negative of it?
Our personal relationships with death are just that, absolutely personal, and informed by so much, the lives that we've lived, the places that we were born, the parents that we had, the upbringings, the children or not, all of it. For some, death does come as a relief, for some. And that is still worthy of honor. When somebody who has a physical illness that is very painful in the body dies, one of the platitudes is, well, they're not in pain anymore. Yeah, we don't afford that same platitude to somebody who died as a result of suicide, perhaps because they were deep mental, emotional, existential pain. And so that still deserves honor and sanctity to me. I would like it if we could honor death for what it is, which is the ending of a life. There are a lot of different ways that people die that are painful and brutal and violent and sad, and that really, really break my heart. I wish I could save everybody from ever reaching an end of that sort. And yet, when we place a value on how some people die as opposed to how other people die, when we make some deaths good or some deaths bad or some deaths okay and some deaths wrong, that I think serves to further create a value system around death that doesn't serve us in the big picture. Death just is. It's the ending of a life. And if we can view it that way, I think it would serve us significantly.
Wow, thank you for that. I am always looking to think in a different way, be open to ideas. And it wasn't that I was thinking it was wrong, just that idea though that you've actually just said, where it's like, well, no, it needs to be honored because for that person, it meant that. And there's just, I think the reason I asked the question is there's too many suicides happening in the world.
So many.
It seems like there's more now, more people that I know are taking their own lives. And it's just heartbreaking to think that that's the thing they go to as like their escape, and thinking through how we can help others not get to that point and maybe seek help. Because when you are on your deathbed, let's say you have cancer and stuff, it's like what that person would give to have the choice. And that people who have the choice, how can we help them not see death as the escape that's going to help them, but actually living is the thing that can help?
Mm-hmm. It's tricky because, none of us know what the experience is like unless we've been there ourselves. And even though in the depths of my depression, I would have begged for it at some point, I never took any steps to see it through, which means that I don't know the level of either clarity or desperation it takes to get there. Such that the help that might be available is really, really hard to determine what that could be, because I don't know what that experience is like. Even at my worst, I still had a sense that there could be life that felt good. It was really, really, really hard to see at times, but I knew I'd felt it before. And so I had to bank on the fact that I would feel it again. But that went away for big moments of time where I couldn't see through anymore. My hope is that we get enough mental health support in this country. I think post-pandemic, we really need a lot more mental health support. That we get enough mental health support in this country that it's easier for us to say, hey, I'm hurting and I need some help, or can you stay with me tonight, or I'm having a really, really hard day today, such that people can feel a lot more free to share the things that are difficult and pressing on them, the things that create isolation, that make people want to hide from this life or get out.
What are the things that you have found that just make you thrive in life now?
Love. But I also find that for my sense of style and how I like to dance. So love is a beautiful one. Sunshine in my space, like the place where I sleep and where I live, that really feels like a lot of life is happening. Color, wearing color, being in colorful surroundings, it's like the visual spice of life. I just get so excited. Other humans are just the jam. I think we are so fascinating and unique with all these rich, tangled stories of heartbreak and pain and joy and things that drive us. I think humans are tremendous. Laughter. My niece's laughter. My nephew's bravado. He's 19 and you can't tell him nothing. And I think it is so adorable.
How did you discover then all of these things that you love? Because again, I'm always trying to think about how you've been able, like your story is so powerful that you've been able to find so much beauty in life. And I really would love that for everybody. So how did you start to discover, open yourself up to discovering these things?
Pause long enough. I think if we pause long enough, we'll be able to tell how we feel about something. When I leave your presence today, I'm pretty sure I'm gonna feel inspired. I'm gonna feel tingly. I'm gonna feel like I just had a glass of champagne. That tells me that I value this time with you. And if I need to pause in order to be present to that feeling, so pause long enough, you'll be able to tell the things that say, don't go there, stop talking to this person, quit that job, or take this one. Just pause long enough and you'll be able to tell.
As a death doula, who has been the person that has rocked you emotionally the most and why?
I'd say my last client that I wrote about in the book, named Miss Bobby. I finished the book with her story because it was so powerful to me. I had been visiting her one-on-one for a few years at this point. She had Parkinson's and was just bedridden at that point in an elder care facility where she was one of 3 beds in the room. There was just like a curtain between her and the other people in the room with her. And every time I'd go in there, she looked like she'd been forgotten about. Granted, she had family members that cared for her, but this was a place that I think didn't have a lot of extra staff or not a lot of amenities to make things really lovely. And every time I'd walk in, her entire face would light up. And I would get so excited to go and see her. She loved my jewelry. She loved the way I dressed. And so I made sure to put on something nice for her. And she would just be so happy. Her hands just wouldn't, but she would try to clap. And I'd sit by her side and she'd tell me stories. And I'd brush her hair and I'd paint her nails and file them and pluck her chin hairs because they'd been forgotten about and she didn't want them there, but she couldn't do it herself anymore. Change her socks and just listen to her talk about her life. I've been hired by her daughters who weren't present, who couldn't be present with her as often as they would have liked, and so I would go and visit her. I learned so much about her. I learned a lot about the life that she'd led so far. She was a Black woman who'd had opportunities in this life that many Black women of her age never would have known. She was a traveling nurse, and so even during the Jim Crow era in the States, was able to go into places that Black people weren't allowed into. She had been overseas, she'd been to China, she'd been to Russia, she'd been to France, she'd been to Peru, she'd been to so many different places. She'd lived this really fun, wild, to me, life. And she met her end in the way that many of us do, elderly, incapable of handling most of her own basic needs. And yet she still had that spark. She still had that joy. She still had that curiosity about life and about another human and about me. I love her. I loved her. And she had a respiratory event, I think, or a cardiac event nearing the end of her life. And I pretended it wasn't happening for a little bit until it dawned on me that she probably wouldn't live to see her 95th birthday. I feel emotional talking about it right now. This is probably about 7 or 8 years ago. The example of her life, about being unapologetic about who she was at a time when her life was supposed to be this very, very small version of one, was a reminder to me that each day I live is mine to make with it as I want to. I will forever be grateful to Miss Bobby for all that she shared with me, for the example that she left, and also for the life that she led.
Just want to honor you and you being there for her.
It was truly my honor. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
What do you want people to remember from your life?
That I cared. I want them to know that I cared. Yeah, that I did what I could to make this really, really painful point for most of us just a little bit easier. I tried really hard. I did my best. And that I love French fries and donuts and fried plantains and kale.
And kale. Did you really? What do you think about legacy?
I think we heap a lot onto legacy that is unfair to us. Yeah, 102, 110 billion have come and gone already. I know the names of maybe of the ones that are dead, maybe 150. And that's the things that I was taught in school mostly. You know? Yeah, it's not that serious. Your legacy is how you make people feel. That was Dr. Maya Angelou. Yeah, they may forget what you said, what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And so let's keep that up. Don't be an asshole. Try, anyway.
I was about to end the interview, but I'm like, can we really end on don't be an arsehole?
Yes. That's a great place to end. We're done.
And Laura says, just don't be an arsehole.
Don't be an asshole.
The takeaway for the whole interview. That's amazing. Homie, thank you so much for today. Where can people find you and your freaking amazing book, Briefly Perfectly Human?
On the internet, always. You can find me at aluaarthur.com or goingwithgrace.com. And my book in all major booksellers everywhere.
If you refuse to waste another year of your life feeling stuck, then keep watching.
If we didn't get honest with ourselves over the last 2 years, or we didn't have an awakening, or we didn't have that nudge or that feeling, how can we invite that right now so that we don't look back to today, 2 years from now, and be like, nothing changed, because nothing changed.
And so what would you say? Let's say now people are listening, they're like, okay, I really want to invite this in. What is that first step on inviting it in?
Yeah.
Because sometimes you've just spent so many years ignoring it and pushing it out. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes you actually don't realize the door's still locked.
Yeah.
So how do you start to unlock that?
Yeah. So I always think about when you feel safe to answer that question really, because there is a difference. It's like if you're talking to the barista at Starbucks and they ask you how you are, I think good and busy are appropriate responses. When
Not give them your life story.
Yes, when you are with your friend, like we were just having lunch, when you're with your friend and they kind of, you know, you get past the good and busy and then you kind of lean in a little bit and you feel safe. So I would first say, like, how can you create a safe space, whether it is with someone else or yourself, to have the bandwidth to process? And there's a chapter in the book called like feel your feelings, like feelings are meant to be felt. And it was a massive lesson that I learned in working with a toddler, my toddler, who is a deep feeler. Like she is just, I mean, she'll literally sit down and be like, let's talk about my feelings. And we talk about feelings a lot. And I recognized that a lot of times in life, we've believed the lie that like good is the destination. Like we should always just be trying to get to good and happy, right? Like happiness is the goal. Even in children's books, I'll like see when it talks about things, it's like the goal is to be happy. Well, a lot of us are unhappy, and that unhappiness results in us feeling broken. Surely something is wrong with me because, and you talk about this, where your gratitude turned into like the prison, like the handcuffs of like, gratitude is wonderful. Gratitude is a great practice, but it can also make us belittle the hard or the pain or the like uncomfort of life. And so if somebody is sitting there and they don't even know where to start, like first, how can you create a safe space? Does that look like blocking off an hour of your time and sitting in your car where you don't have distractions? Does it look like standing in the shower where you don't have your phone to numb yourself out? Does it look like taking a weekend trip or a staycation or booking a hotel room? Does it look like sitting in your closet floor while your kids don't know where you are? Like, what does that look like? And it's fascinating to me because if I look back on my decade of entrepreneurship, the biggest times that I had like the greatest evolutions or breakthroughs were the times where I gave myself margin and space, like time to think. When I cut back on work and I said, okay, now I'm gonna paint or I'm gonna do different things. And so when we don't create margin and space, we don't have room for creativity. We don't have room for questioning. We don't have room for exploration. We don't have room for curiosity. And I think all of those things are required to actually change.
Oh, that's so hard though when you've been spending so much time blocking out the feelings, right? So you even said in the book, like we talk ourselves out of our own feelings.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
Yeah, we have numbed out our feelings. And here's kind of an example of a way that we've done this. So even with our best friends, so I have some friends I've been friends with college. We went to college together. And we'll like voice text and we talk about everything, the good, the bad, the ugly. But I've noticed that whenever we have something hard in our life, we're always like, but it's not that bad because you're doing so much more. Or it's not that bad because I know of a single parent. Or it's not that bad because I know someone has it worse. And our culture has this beautiful awareness, right? We are so aware of how fortunate we are, of privilege, of, you know, situations where like other people do have it massively worse. There's no denying it. But when we lean on that or when we compare our hard to someone else's hard, we belittle what's actually happening in our life. I do it all the time. I had a really hard parenting week and I was just like, I feel like a terrible mom. I just don't know how to mother right now. And then I was sending it to my friend and I was just like, tell me it gets easier. Like, tell me. And then I was like, but I'm so lucky and I'm so, you know, and we do that. And it's like, when did we enter into a space where we can't say, this is hard right now, or I need help right now? And so when it comes to emotions, I feel like we do a lot of the same thing where it's like, I'm sad, but I should be happy because of this. And so I've had to teach my daughter, like, if you're sad, it's okay to be sad and like to feel it, because when you allow yourself to feel it, then you can start to move forward. If we're just trying to bury it, we all know it erupts at some point, whether it's with our spouse or children or a team or whatever that looks like. And so I've tried to help her, give her tools to feel her feelings and then move through them. So even before I left for this trip, I left a note for her and it said, remember, and I drew pictures because she can't read the words. It said, smell the flowers and blow out the candles to take deep breaths. Because she'll say, Mommy, show me how to do it. And so I'm like sometimes we need to remember how to smell the flowers and blow out the candles so that we can just sit in our feelings without trying to push them or get past them or move through them too quickly.
God, that's so powerful. Because we really, you think you say default, right?
Yeah.
Like we all think of happiness as being our default.
Yep.
And so if we're not there, then something is wrong. But yet so much of my own life has, the beauty has come through the struggle. Now look, it is all in hindsight, because when you're
Yes.
struggling, it doesn't feel right.
Yes.
So what do you tell yourselves in those moments where you're feeling down?
Yeah.
And you know, right? Like, because there's a big gap between intellectually knowing and then feeling it.
Yes.
So when you're feeling sad and you may be saying, well, I should be happy, you know that well, hang on a minute, happiness isn't the default, but it still doesn't feel real. Is it the deep breaths that then soothes you in those moments so that you're not being overwhelmed by the fact that you think you should, quote unquote, be happy?
Yeah. Well, even when I was in my tough motherhood week, for me, I have to turn and like serve others. Like, so I was like, you know what? I'm going to reach out to 3 other moms just to say, I'm thinking of you. Hope you're doing okay. Is there something with the moon cycle going on? Because our kids are crazy, but like we're in this together. Because a lot of times I think what I've found with emotions is we feel lonely in them, right? And with the world we live in, everyone's showing up with their happy faces online. And so when we're feeling sad or frustrated or anxious or overwhelmed, it feels isolating. And when I feel isolated, I then go into that narrative of like, something's wrong with me. I'm broken. It's me. It's nothing else. It's just me. Something is wrong. And so I found that like when I invite people in or share or even just reach out to other people and I hear like, oh, you're not alone, or this resonates, or like, I'm in the thick of it too. I'm like, oh, nothing's broken. This is just a part of the process. I posted these Instagram stories because I had like a marathon work day, and Coco woke up at like 3 a.m. and was literally asking me what the Northern Hemisphere was.
At 3 a.m,
yep,
as you do.
And for 2.5 hours, why do people sleep on their backs? Where do dogs sleep? Do cows stand up? The questions coming out of this 3-year-old were insane. And I posted this Instagram story the next day and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm probably going to delete this, but like, I am just exhausted and I love being a mom and I love my work so much. And it just feels like so much love to carry sometimes that it's so hard. Because it's like, I feel stretched thin because of the fullness of life. So nothing is bad and nothing is broken and nothing is wrong, but like life is full and I don't know if I can always carry that. And I was like, I think I'm going to delete these, but I just wanted to share where I'm at. Well, my DMs just flooded with people like, oh my gosh, I'm in it. I'm in the thick of it. And I was like, oh, I'm not alone. Oh, this is normal. I think sometimes we just want to feel a little less alone and like a little more enough. And so when it comes to feelings, it's like if we know that we are not the only ones, it kind of gives us permission to like sit with it a little bit longer, to like not waste the waiting of like trying to get back to whatever default we're trying to get back to.
And do you think that was so powerful, but do you think that we keep trying to go back to the default because it's a comfort zone? Like, what is that?
I think it's just because it's our programming. We've been taught to be happy, healthy, smile, show up, all those things. And of course, happiness would be a great destination to land on. But if we don't release the pressure that it has to be our go-to state at all times, I think our lives would actually be fuller. Because, they always say like the dichotomy, like you don't know how rich happiness can be if you haven't experienced the depth of sadness. And when we're like just kind of trying to maintain a status quo, our lives are like bland, right? I feel like there are times where you can look at your calendar and be like, who booked this? Or like, I don't want to do this thing. Or like, why did I say yes to this thing? And it's like we go through these days just to get through them. Like we're not actually in them. I think that's a problem.
Yeah, God, that's so powerful. And so you shared a bit of your story where you lost 2 children.
Yeah.
And so to this point of happiness.
Yeah.
It's going to be a hard question for me to ask, but I hope you're okay to go there.
I'll go there.
When you have tried to have a child and you've already lost 2 and now you're on your 3rd one and it's like you feel the blessing. And in moments that you just said where you're exhausted and this blessing is now a strain and this blessing is now tiring you, stressing you out, definitely do, maybe not getting in your way, but definitely in competition with where your hours are going to be spent on your business and stuff like that. How do you own those moments without feeling guilty about them?
I would love to know the answer to that question.
Okay.
I feel like it's interesting because motherhood is like the greatest gift in my life. And I have always, like, when I decided I wanted to be a mom, I wanted to be a really good mom. And it's wild because I have so much confidence in saying I'm a really good mom. Like, I am a great
freaking amazing
mother. And I'm there and I love my kids. But it's interesting because even lately, I can find myself questioning, like, is it the right time? Should I be working? Should I, like, even last night, I'm in LA to be here with you. And I went to sleep and didn't turn on Coco's baby monitor, and she woke up yelling for me. And, like, that freaking, like, breaks your heart. Because you're like, I should be there. I should be here. I should be there. I need sleep, but I should, and it's like, I should. And it's like, what is balance? And I've found in my journey that, like, balance doesn't work for me. Like, I have to blend things because I can't be one person in one moment and another person in the next. And for me, I tried to do that. Like, I wanted to be like Mom Jenna and CEO Jenna. And I am just Jenna. I am a whole human being. I mean, we were like eating lunch and I'm pumping, but we're talking about business and, like, this is just the dichotomy of what it means. And it's fascinating because women with children who work feel guilty because they're not with their kids. And women who stay home with their children feel guilty because they're not contributing or working. Mm-hmm. And it's wild because I've even had to get so careful in my language around using the words like working mom, because every mom is working. But like a mother with a career, or like how I even phrase it, because it is such a sensitive thing. And so it's interesting, like on those challenging days, because I love entrepreneurship. I'm a lifestyle entrepreneur through and through. Like, I love the lifestyle that entrepreneurship has afforded me. And I'm so content with not growing every year, with not, one-upping myself. I'm like, if I can maintain my lifestyle and maintain living my life, I am living the dream. And so most of the time I have so much flexibility. Like, I put kids down for naps all day. I feed Quinn. I'm like, have fun. I'm like typing with one hand. Like, that's the life that I've chosen. But it doesn't mean it's easy. And so it is wild. And it's also really hard because it's like, I prayed so hard for these kids. And so I see them as just like the best miracles in the world. But that doesn't mean that it's not hard still. Like, joy and gratitude can exist with challenge. Mm-hmm. And it's like, how do you find the space to live in that? And it's uncomfortable.
It's so true, and it's really uncomfortable. And the reason why I asked that question is because I really think it's relevant on every aspect of someone's life. It doesn't matter
100%.
if it's kids.
Yep.
If you're trying to go for something,
Yep.
a sports career, or starting a business, a family, and you try and you fail, and you try and you fail, and you try, and then you succeed. But there are moments of exhaustion.
Yeah.
There are moments of tears and unhappiness and sadness and what the hell am I doing? Like, in every aspect. But when we fight hard for something, and we tell everybody this is what we're going to do, and then in those moments where we've got it and we're shattered, we feel guilty about saying how tired we are, because most people actually will respond, well, that's what you wanted.
Yes.
Right? And so now you're like, I have no space to have an exhale, to do the blow out the candle, the smell the roses, blow out the candle. I've got no space to do that because now I feel guilty about saying when something's tough.
Yep.
And I think that's doing such a disservice. And going to like the parenting thing, I can only imagine what that feels like when it's a human being.
I know.
Right? Where it's like, I've been wanting this child, and yet it's freaking difficult. And there are times where I need help. I'm struggling. And we feel like we are, and I think going back to the very first question of how do we get stuck? It's these little things, those little moments where we don't feel like we can exhale. We don't feel like we can talk to people because there's no one there to greet us.
Yeah. Oh gosh. One thing that I started doing, actually I did it to you last week, but in reaching out to people who have big things going on, whether you just had a baby, you're launching a book, you're starting a business, is not projecting what I think they should be feeling. And so one of my friends had a baby recently, and I messaged her and I said, on a scale of 1 to 5, where are you at today? Are you needing encouragement, or are you feeling on top of the world? Because I remember when I first had Coco, I was just so grateful. Like, she's safe, she's healthy. Like, I mean, it was better than $1 million. But people would be like, oh, you must be so exhausted. You must, and they were projecting that. And I was like, oh, I actually, like, I'm doing really good. And then there would be times where people would be like, isn't this the best age? And I'd be like, oh my gosh, this age is so challenging. And so I've tried to start approaching conversations and being like, tell me where you're at and what you need before I project how you should be feeling or how I think you are feeling. Because when we do that, it doesn't give space. Imagine telling a new mom, like, you must be overjoyed, but really they're overwhelmed. They would feel crazy to say, actually, I'm like in a really dark place, or, you know. And so I've been trying to like start conversations of like, tell me where you're at so I can converse accordingly, so I can support you accordingly. And I think that's really changed a lot. And I think if we did that for ourselves too, of like, instead of thinking how I should feel, like, where am I at on a scale of 1 being miserable and 5 being on top of the world and vibrant? Where am I at?
And when you answer the question honestly and you realize you're at like a 0 or a 1, how do you then start to change that? Because when you asked me, actually, it's interesting. I think it was like a 1 to 10 you asked me. And I went to put 1, and then part of me felt guilty about putting a 1, because I was like, well, I don't want her to think I'm really that bad. So let me just put a 3. I can't remember what I ended up answering you. But it was interesting how I processed my answer to you in order to, in fact, in real time, I'm actually processing this now. What was interesting is it allowed me to process, am I actually feeling that bad? Or am I just tired? In fact,
it was your check-in.
In fact, oh my God, I have to talk to you about this. Girl, it is the best line in your book. Do you need to change careers or just take a nap?
Yes.
I actually laughed out loud because it's so true. When you get to burnout, you're like, I need to move places, I need to move countries, what the hell am I doing with my career? And then you take a nap and you eat well and you sit in the sun and all of a sudden you're like, I love my career.
Isn't that funny? There's a story in my book when I hit burnout, and I literally like wanted to take my laptop and like Control-Alt-Delete the whole thing and like chuck it out the window. And thank God I took like some melatonin and like took a little snooze and like woke up the next day and was like, oh, I'm okay. And I always come back to this idea of like, what we need is rest. And it's like that rest, don't quit idea of like, we quit and give up so easily because it's hard, or we're tired, or we're lacking resources, or whatever it is, when really we just need to slow our pace down. Or we need to remember that like we've already come so far, or we just need to take a break or take a step away. And so many people, I think, are walking around with this guilt of not having achieved what they thought they would, or not following through on their commitments, or not achieving the goal, when really all they needed was a break. They just needed to rest. And I sometimes recognize that in myself, where if I have a idea I'm so excited about, but then I find myself in it and I'm like, oh, what was I thinking? This is crazy. I'm like, I don't need to quit it. First, I just need to rest. I interviewed Nastia Liukin, who's an Olympic gymnast. And I remember, I will never forget part of her interview where I asked her, were there days that you ever wanted to quit? And she goes, oh, there are so many days. But my parents, her dad was her coach, said you can only quit on a good day. And I think about that a lot, because if you asked anyone on a good day, would you quit? They wouldn't, right? I mean, 99% of the people would be like, hell no, this is amazing. And so I've always thought about that when I'm having a bad day, because I'm like, would I quit if this was a really good day? No. Okay, then I just need to rest.
That's a true test right there.
Yes. And I feel like it's such a powerful thing, because when we think about the story in my book where I'm talking about like, you don't have to move zip codes and all these things, it's like so many of us, and I feel like even culturally right now, we've experienced burnout, like as a culture, through what we've all been through all the uncertainty. It's like we're just burnt out on uncertainty, right? And so it's like, where is the breakthrough? And I hope that for some people, the breakthrough is in them understanding what they are willing to do and what they won't do. And like what they want to do and what they will refuse to do, and what boundaries will look like and how they want to move forward. And I feel like we have this beautiful invitation right now to craft a new life. Like we kind of get this fresh start. It's like why we love Mondays and January 1st and the start of months is like we all are craving a new start, like a fresh beginning. And it's like any day can be your fresh beginning. But like, what would it look like if you were well rested and like awake to your life and like awake to the vision and like willing to progress? And we always use this line in my book. It's like where the woo meets the work, because so many of us are believing that we have to be in one camp or the other. And I really, truly believe that there are two camps, especially for women right now. It's the manifestation side, you know, dream it and it'll come. Just say what you want into the universe. I'll bring it to you. And the hustle side, the wake up at 5 a.m., grind a little harder, don't give up, be relentless in your pursuit. And these camps have become polarizing, like everything else on planet Earth, of like it's one or the other, it's this or that. And I want more room for the and. And so one of the words and lines that we use in my book often is it's where the woo meets the work, where we can have these manifestations and these visions, but we also are willing to do the work to make them happen. I mean, it's like actual proven science that manifestation. I had Dr. Tara Swart on the podcast, and her interview was fascinating. And I was like, tell me about manifestation. Does it really work? She said, the reason why it works is if you keep the vision close enough to you, you will keep moving towards it. And it's kind of like when you are on the market to buy something new, like you're going to buy like new shoes or a new purse or whatever it is that you like to buy, you all of a sudden start noticing them, right? Yeah. And so if you have that vision close enough, you start to notice that things can work and things are happening and things can unfold or invitations are coming your way. And so I want to invite people to recognize that like it's not one or the other, it can be an and. And when we hold visions and when we come out of this, I hope we have a vision, we can start to put the work behind it.
Whew, okay, there's so much that you just said there. First of all, I love the line you even say, because your podcast gold diggers, you're like, but look, be a gold digger, but also be a goal getter.
Yes.
And that's the second part that a lot of people miss.
Yes.
And so I love that you said that. It's like, look, you need the vision in order to know how to act, but you also have to act.
Yes.
And then leaning on what you just said about boundaries, I really want to go down in here because I really want people to know everything you say, you are the epitome of practicing what you preach. So sometimes I'll text you, or you'll text me like, sorry, I just woke up from a nap. Yeah. And I'm like, I love your life.
I know.
Like, but here's the thing, it wasn't accidental.
Yeah.
And that was the thing, like when we talk a lot and you know, I just had a nap or I had a massage.
Yeah.
You work hard at your work.
Yeah.
But you also give yourself utter grace and beauty to take the nap, to do the rest. Yeah. And you are such the epitome of that. And to do that, you said your hero is boundaries.
Yes, let's talk about it. Boundaries are fascinating to me because I feel like there was this line back in the day in Sex and the City, and when I was emo and had AOL Instant Messenger, I remember I used that line in my AIM profile at one point. But it's something about like how boundaries keep things out. Like we believe that boundaries are like these fences that like keep things or people or opportunities out. But I have learned the exact opposite, that boundaries keep me in my life. They keep me in the moment. They keep me in alignment. They keep me living in integrity. And I really learned this so much when I became a new mom and I realized that like I was lacking boundaries. Like in 1 minute, I could be like typing an email for work and then I'd be feeding a baby. And I recognized that like if I want to truly blend these things, I have to have boundaries. Because I don't want to get a text message when I'm with my family out at the zoo and all of a sudden I'm thinking about work and it pulls me out of my life. Like I want to be in the moments that I'm in. And so when I create boundaries, whether it's with my team or relationships or what I will say yes and no to, it really keeps me living in integrity with what I say are my values. Because we all say that certain things are our values, but our actions do not line up, right? And that's just the human nature. I'm not perfect at that, but I try really freaking hard. And it's funny because, you know, I'll hear people talk about their values or like family first or all these things. Well, like, you look at their life and it's like, when do they even have time for their family? Or like, you know, I enter entrepreneurship to have freedom, but I'm like tied to my work. Like, how does this happen? And so I love boundaries. I exercise them, but I do it with grace and I do it with conviction. And here's a good example. When Coco was born, I literally blacked out my entire calendar and said, I'm going to say no to everything for an entire year because I didn't know what motherhood would feel like. I didn't know how I would feel. I said no to everything. I told my team, don't even let me see emails. I don't even want to see opportunities because they're going to feel sparkly and shiny, and nothing is shinier than being home with my kid. And it was a beautiful thing because I wrote a template and it basically said, thank you so much for this invitation. I'm so flattered or honored that you reached out to me. And I just want you to know that I'm going to politely decline, but it is not in any way a reflection of you, your idea, your invitation. It is only a reflection of me living out my values. If I say yes to you, I'm saying no to what matters the most to me or what I say matters the most to me. And I just want you to know that I am cheering you on. I wish you the best. And I hope that in doing this and doing it in this way, it invites you to live out your values in a stronger way. And never once did anyone get angry with me. We're always so worried about disappointing people. In fact, I think that that response inspired more people than disappointed them.
So what are the steps to get there? A, acknowledging that you absolutely need the boundary in the first place of where things aren't serving you.
Yep.
And then how do you start to implement it? Because everything you said is so beautiful, right? Showing someone grace. Girl, I'm so freaking with you there.
Yeah.
Because when you think about it from the flip, when someone's putting a boundary on you, how would you want them to say, hey, you're crossing a boundary, stop doing that? Or would you want them to go, you know, I'm really doing this because it's for me. I'm so happy. Hopefully this helps you. It's like, wow, shit, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So it gives a great perspective. But some people are too petrified to even say to themselves, you deserve to set a boundary.
Yes.
So how on earth did you even realize that you were worth it?
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that I feel like we are so afraid of saying no because we are afraid of losing momentum. Whether that's momentum in motherhood, career, relationship, we worry that setting a boundary is going to pause or slow down our success and that we'll never be able to catch back up. It is like this fear of God in us that if we pump the brake, we won't know where the gas pedal is. And I think that the reason that is because so many of us feel like our success had to have been a fluke, or that we were lucky, or that someone gave us our big break, or that we're never going to get this opportunity again. We got to strike while the iron's hot. Well, the iron is hot when you turn the iron on, friend. You know? Like, I have seen so many women who are like just running and they're like, I'll slow down when things slow down. Nothing's going to slow down. Has life slow down, you know? And so it's like, when did we stop trusting ourselves to know how to turn the iron on?
I'm going to steal that, by the way. That is
do.
so amazing.
Please do, because it's like, it's so wild. So when it comes to boundaries, we refuse to set them because we are just waiting for our next big break. We are just waiting for invites to keep the momentum when we don't realize like we were the source in the beginning. Like other people's things aren't working for you because they're not from you. Like they didn't come from you. And so with boundaries, I mean, first things first is like, pull out your calendar and do an audit. What do you never want to do again? What are you mad that you agreed to? What do you see on your calendar and you're like, I never want to see that again? Now, I mean, some things you've got to keep, whether it's like taking your kid to soccer practice or like doing the laundry or whatever, but there are
I'm gonna challenge you on doing the laundry.
Preach, you're right. But there are so many opportunities for us to create like a not to-do list.
Yeah.
It's like our lives are like constant to-do lists. And there are things, so like for me, being in alignment was like, the first step was when I was a wedding photographer, it was like, I'm going to take one weekend off each month, which in the Midwest, the wedding season is 6 months long. That's like literally cutting out a chunk of your income. But I was like, I don't even enjoy summer anymore. I don't even enjoy it because I don't have time for it. I missed friends' weddings. I missed family cabin weekends. When I was with my family, I brought my computer with. I was constantly tethered. I was never off. And so what is one small way that you can do that? And usually a calendar audit will show you like, here's what your life is saying about your values, your priorities, and your goals, because this is what you're doing. And how we spend our days is how we spend our life. And so I would start with that and do a not to do list. And the second piece of that, and there's a chapter in the book about this where it's like, what is your enough point? And a lot of us are overworking ourselves because we're so afraid of like scarcity, but we don't recognize that there is an enough point where what we have is enough, what we've earned is enough, that our work is enough. And I have pivoted so many times in my career. And the only way I've ever been able to pivot and try something new was saying, I am only going to book the bare minimum to pay the mortgage or to buy the groceries or whatever it is. And I'm going to just free up my time. My time is more valuable than my money right now. And when we work out of our place of like our enoughness, we feel the safety and security necessary to then be able to have the freedom for creativity and margin and rest. But so many of us don't even know what an enough point is. We don't know like what is the bare minimum that I need to do. And we also don't know how to cut it off when we hit that point, right?
Right.
So it's like more is more. More is not always more. More is not always better. And so I love, and you guys talk about this all the time too, is it's like money will only buy you happiness to a certain extent. And I remember the day that I hit 6 figures and I was like, I thought this would feel different. I am so burnt out. I'm exhausted. I would way rather make $50,000 and have weekends free, time with my husband. Like this, I have money in my bank account and I can't even enjoy it. And so I had to establish an enough point. And I told you, I remember, I literally made this like color-coded spreadsheet and sat him down and I said, I'm going to tell you something and I just want to know if you agree. And I said, I am willing to cut my work in half and go back to making $50,000 a year because I was happier. Are you with me on that? Are you okay with me? And he looked so relieved. Where he was like, you're right. We don't need more. We've got more than we ever needed. We were happier. You were more available and present. And so it's like every time I've hit those thresholds, I'm like, what is my enough point? What do we need? And how do I just meet my basic needs and then claim back my time?
And that's what you do every time.
Every
It's just
time.
like my enough point.
And now I don't need anything. So now it's like I work out of a place of like, I want to do this, not I have to do this, which is crazy.
How much has that changed how you feel about yourself, how you show up every day, how you think,
I
your
love it because I don't
confidence?
have to do anything.
Right.
Like I know that I could like hang up and like go live in the woods for the rest of my life. And that would be a really good life. But I love what I do so much. And I show up because I love it. But it also gives me that feeling of like, I don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
So anything you see me doing from this point on is because I want to. And that's exciting.
I love that. Go, you've been through such an evolution of like careers and the way you show up every day. And in that, there are things that you've done that you're like, I said I'd never do this, and now I do.
Yeah.
I said I'd never do this, and now this is the best thing that's happened to me. So many people get stuck in the contradiction.
Yes.
So many people will spend the rest of their lives
Yes.
not addressing what they now want
Yes.
because they fear or the judgment of the fact that they said once upon a time they were going to do this.
Yeah.
Go, this freaking haunts me. How on earth do you approach those things and make change? Whether it's going against judgment, going against opinion. Because man, if we can figure out this thing where people can go, oh my God, yes.
Yeah.
I can give myself the freedom to say, I said I'd never do this, and now here I am. And I'm gonna own it.
Yeah. It's funny, there is this idea of identity foreclosure.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's the reason why we hang on to our jeans from high school. It's the reason why we finish degrees when we know they weren't the right choice. It's because we're like, but I already paid for this, or I've already spent 2 years. Why would I waste it? Why are we wasting 2 more years when we know it's not the right thing? And so it is crazy because, and I experienced this in real life when I left my corporate job that had like a 5-word title that sounded really impressive and became a photographer, and people treated me like it was a hobby. I went through this total identity crisis of like, how do I tell people that like my business is important, and how do I make them understand that like I'm really good? And it was wild to me because I was like, man, like we lean on things like as absolutes, right? Like the executive position or the CEO title or like all these things sound so important. And it's wild because so when Drew and I got married, we were 23 and we were like, we're never having kids. I mean, we were very confident in that. And we were married for 5 years. And we loved our lives. We loved our freedom. We loved sleep. We loved all of these things. And we were just very content. And I loved it. And I loved that time in our life. Both of our parents were married for 5 years before they had kids. And so it was kind of a great thing where neither of our parents were like in a rush. But I think it also devastated them when we were like, nope, we're not having kids. Never. You've been through that. And then my heart started to change, and it was weird because I'm like, I have spent a lot of time and energy and money trying not to have this thing. And now I've changed my mind. And I also didn't know what Drew would think, like, because we had these conversations. So you guys went through the reverse.
Literally, which I'm fascinated to
Literally
talk
the
to
reverse.
about
You
this.
wanted 4 kids and you were going to be the mama at home. And I was like, never. And now we're like sitting here flipped. And I remember, I think a big thing for us was when our brothers both became dads and we got to see someone so close to us change and step into that new identity and also kind of see the reality of like what that meant. And I remember kind of being like, I don't know, I think I might want this, and like really worried about it because I was really at a good place in my career. And, you know, there was just things where I was like, these are the opportunities I've waited for. Am I going to ruin it all by now having changed my mind? And I start off that chapter saying, like, remember when our yearbooks, when you were like, never change, I can't, you know, I love you for who you are, all these things. And I wish that the messaging was like, I can't wait to watch you change. I can't wait to watch who you're going to become. I can't wait to watch you evolve. And I feel like my life has been this conscious meeting of myself often. Like I am like getting to know who I am all the time. It's like every big thing, every milestone, everything that has changed, every new project, it's like, who am I? And like, do I like her? And like, how can I get to know her? There's a quote by Ruby Carr who's like, I will only be this version of myself right now. Like I want to sit and be with her for a while. And I love that because I think we often box ourselves in. We kind of there's a line in the book where it's like we put ourselves into like personality Tupperware where we're like trying to separate, like, these are the pieces of me and these are the ways I describe myself and like this is who I am, where it's like, who can I become? And so when I changed my mind and when Drew was on board and also had changed his mind, you know, it was one of those things where it's like, well, I'm going to eat my words. And I mean, I had recorded a podcast of like 10 reasons why I won't be a mom.
Oh my God.
Like,
I hadn't heard
there
that.
was I was committed.
Oh my God.
And there have also been podcasts where I'm like, I will never write a book.
Okay, so these are perfect. How on earth do you start to listen to the whisper? Because I think that's where it starts, right?
Yeah.
It's not like all of a sudden one day you go, oh my God, I actually wanted kids. Everyone, hey, I know I said I didn't, but now I do. It doesn't happen like that, right?
Yep.
It starts with this little whisper.
Yep.
This little inkling, this little feeling.
Nudge.
And yeah, the nudge. And then that gets a little louder and
Yep.
a little louder. I'm looking for that pivotal moment where people go, I'm going to shut this, lock it in a box and throw away the key because I never want anyone to hear the thoughts of how much I want to change, but I'm never going to. So many people do that and they'll spend the rest of their lives so dedicated to that one commitment they made way back in the day.
Yeah.
But you didn't.
No one remembers those things. We remember those things. Someone the other day, I was on a podcast with her and she was like, I'm so embarrassed because I announced to my audience that I was going to do a podcast with this person and it fell through and I'm just so embarrassed. And I was like, I'm a very close follower of you and I have no idea what you're talking about. And I was like, you know, it's like we all forget, like we have our own microscope up to our own lives, right? Everyone is also head down in their own life. No one is paying that close of attention. There have been times in my life where I've made decisions based around other people, or like, I want to move, but like, what if I move and then like everyone moves away? Or like, I want to stay here because of our community. And it's like, no one else is making decisions based on me. So why am I making decisions based on everyone else? And like, for me, I love contradicting myself because I think it shows evolution. Like there are things that I listen to that I said as like absolutes. And there are things even that I wrote in this book where I'm like, 10 years from now, I'm going to look at this and be like, oh, you sweet little Jenna, you had no idea. But I think that's because I have poised myself proudly as a student of life. I am in life school. And life school means that I'm going to be learning. And if I'm learning, I'm growing. And if I'm growing, I'm evolving. And that's the human experience that we're missing. And so if we can like poise ourselves like at the starting line without disqualifying ourselves from the race before it even begins, that's where we actually make progress. So I love contradicting myself because to me, there's no greater compliment than somebody saying, you've changed.
I love that so much. And so really I do believe it's the framing, right?
Absolutely.
So in those moments, telling yourself that is so important.
Yep.
Because, so in fact, telling yourself, like, there's so much power. And just right now, I want everyone at home to go, yeah, I'm a walking contradiction.
Yeah.
But like even saying it like that, like, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think it does take that ownership of it.
Absolutely.
And for me, to what you're saying is, because I used to, it used to hold me back. I was like, well, I can't say this out loud. I've just told everyone I want 4 children.
Yeah.
God, I can't tell people I don't want kids now.
Yeah.
I've literally told my husband I want 4 children.
Yeah.
And now I've changed my mind. I realize that what I do now is I express that I recognize I'm changing my mind.
Yeah.
Like
Oh,
there's
yeah.
something, like, but back in the day, I never would. I would have tried to hide. Of like,
Yep.
hopefully people don't remember this part of me. And hopefully, and it's that fear of
Yeah.
I hope people don't remember this part that brings up so much anxiety that doesn't allow me to own this other part.
Yep.
But in leaning into the admission
Yeah.
of the fact that you're growing and that you pride yourself on change.
Yeah.
Like perspective is everything, girl, and you
Yeah.
just freaking like laid it out so well and beautifully right there. Because I really do think it's those moments, like this whole discussion.
Yeah.
It's about what gets us stuck.
Yes.
What are the things that stop us from progressing, from moving forward, from having the life we really want? And like that last little nugget of gold is so strong.
Yeah. It's so interesting to me because like if somebody told me like I'm going to change my mind, I would be like, awesome. But it is wild to me how like hesitant we are.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where it's like, I always think about this. This is such a dumb example, but I think it's relevant. Where people will like log off of social media and then they'll come back and be like, I'm so sorry I was away. And I was like, nobody knew you were away. And yet we're all walking around with like guilt and shame that like we're not doing what we said we would do, when really maybe it was never meant for us. And when we think about our lives, it's like no one is like in your life, like looking at every move you make and like analyzing it except for you. And it's like, you talk about this so much where it's like, we are our own worst critic. Like we are the narrators of our story. But there's this part in my book where it was like, what if you were the director of your own life? Like you didn't just cast yourself as the extra or the helper, but like you actually imagine like the scenes of your life as the director and the lead. And like, what if you could like help orchestrate what you really want to have happen? And so it is so fascinating to me when people get so wrapped up in other people's opinions, because I absolutely fall into that trap. I don't know if you felt this way, but like when writing the book, it's such an internal process. It's such like a cathartic thing. And then people start reading it. And like, even my mom came over when I was like in the final manuscript days. And like, I was like, you can read this one chapter, but like, that's it. And like, we're writing, but like, it's this experience. And then you're like, I'm releasing it and now people are reading it. And I was like, am I going to be like so crushed if I get like a negative review? And I was just like freaking out about it. So I asked myself, I said, what are like my favorite books, like the best books? I go up on Amazon, pull it up to read reviews. Oh, they had negative reviews. That's hilarious because I freaking loved that book. And I like reminded myself that like every person who's out there doing something great, even the people that I'm like, oh, they would never get criticism. I'm like, that is just a part of the human process. And so it is so funny to me when people get so wrapped up in like what people would think about a contradiction, or what people would think if you changed, or what people would think if you pursued something new. So much so that it holds you back from doing it. Man, we're like missing out on life.
I agree. And I think that a big part of it, though, is that it's a reflection of us, right?
Yes.
And so it's actually saying to us, well, hang on, what are the contradictions maybe I'm ignoring? Or what are the contradictions that I'm not paying attention to? You know, like all...
Yes, absolutely.
It like shines a light yeah, on our lives. And I think that by saying to someone else, or like, oh, you're not going to do that, like, why is that a belief system that you have? Or even just to your point about apologizing on social for disappearing.
Yeah.
It's like, why do you feel the need to apologize? Like, what is it? It's like, well, I didn't want to let people down. But like, keep digging, right? Keep peeling back the onion, because I think ultimately it reveals something within inside you.
Absolutely.
That maybe you're feeling like, well, I really struggled here, and so my struggle meant I disappeared, and so maybe I let people down, but I felt like I let people down because maybe I let myself down, right?
Yes.
Like, actually freaking unpeeling to see why you feel the need to apologize. It doesn't have to be on social, right? To anyone, or to even say your contradiction that I'm changing.
Yes. Well, it's funny to me because I often think about, like, for me, this is my personal opinion, but I really think that I feel shameful when I have a goal or vision and I'm like, I'm going to commit to this thing and I fall through on it. And I feel so much shame that then I don't even want to try it again. It's like self-sabotage. Like, for me in my life, a lot of times it's health, where I'm like, I'm going to eat super clean. I'm going to do this. I'm going to like, and then the minute I like reach for a DQ dilly bar, which dilly bars are really good from Dairy Queen, just in case you want to know, when I was pregnant. Anyways,
your face just lit up as well.
When I reach for a dilly bar, I'm like, oh, I'm not living into who I said I was. And I feel this like immense guilt and shame. And we all kind of put ourselves on these shame cycles where it's like we get inspired, we overcommit, then we fall through, then we feel guilt, then we feel shame, then we get inspired, and we keep doing this over and over and over again. And the problem isn't that we aren't following through on our commitments. The problem is that we're not seeing that even small progress is progress. And like, for me, I have to build up my belief. And I do that by these micro actions and by like the tiniest commitments that move me closer. Like, I would rather inch my way to a dream than try to sprint and burn out. And I feel like I live my life like that. Like, even when I plan out my work and stuff, it's like, let me just inch closer, because I know that if I burn out, I'm done. Like, I will lose my passion. I will lose my excitement. And so we forget that like any progress is still progress, and we hold ourselves to these impossible standards, and then we get down on ourselves when you don't follow through on them. And so I really think if we like asked anyone, like, what are you feeling guilty about in your life right now? It would be things that we told ourselves we would do, but we weren't able to follow through.
I love that you said, it really stuck with me. Maybe this is the name of your next book. No pressure.
Yeah.
Inch closer.
Yeah.
Like, I'm all about mindset. What are the words I'm going to use in moments of struggle? That's it. Like, I don't judge myself on having the thoughts. I don't judge myself on feeling down or feeling defeated. It's just, what am I going to do when I get there?
Yep.
Inch closer is freaking powerful.
Yeah.
I'm going to steal that as well. That's so good. Because in moments where I feel like I should have done this, I should have done that, the shoulds, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to tell myself, but Lisa, you inch closer.
Yeah. Just a tiny bit. It's funny, when I was in the book writing process, and if you read my book, the epilogue is my favorite part, the story of the massage therapist and the mouse.
Yes, I was so happy you put that in the book.
I know, and you'll have to read it too. That is my favorite part. Like, when I got to read that for the audiobook, I was like, oh. Anyways, this massage therapist was a part of my life throughout the book process. And I remember I went to see her to get a massage, and I was in the writing stages. And she said, I keep envisioning this tree.
If you want to learn the 7 things that women regret the most on their deathbeds, then listen to Gladys, who's 103. Click here right now. At the age of 103 years young, Gladys, you say you didn't find your voice until you were 93 years old. So if